Hello, everybody. Good morning. Um,
Good morning.
so a couple of updates, just so you know. We'll be doing at least an hour or two every day like this until the end of the semester. So I will send you out a schedule for next week. Towards the end of this week, it'll be similar to this week's schedule. And so that way, at least if we're meeting every day until the end, I can get all your questions answered in a timely manner. We can keep moving. It looks like we're getting more people joining all the time. This is great. Hello, everybody who just joined.
When will our final presentations be?
Well, that's a good question because we've never done final presentations through Zoom before. So I was trying to figure out, I guess each person can share their screen for 5 minutes and walk us through the site and answer questions. So and we might have to do that more than one class so that everybody has an opportunity, because not everybody can make every class because of all of our schedules. And so we'll probably do that towards the end of next week in a couple of sessions. That's a real, yeah. So
When is our last class?
well, the semester is over at the end of next week. So our last class would be Friday.
Okay.
And I'm going to schedule these every day from now on. So at least 1 to 2 hours, and maybe we can do longer sessions. I found that the 3-hour sessions that I do for some other classes tend to get, you know, by the 3rd hour, people are starting to turn into jelly. So I think it's maybe a little more effective to have more frequent, shorter, but you know, I'm doing this in a variety of formats, the other classes. And this one I'm trying to do more frequently, less long. I'm not sure if that's better or worse, but it seems to work okay. The 3-hour classes at night are hard enough when you meet face-to-face or online, because people are really busy, and then 3 hours at night. So I have some 6 to 9 classes, which are just, anyway. That's later on, that's tonight. We won't talk about that now.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss part of that. Sorry, I got a board meeting.
That's okay. There's so many meetings. So just a couple of updates. So that was one update, that we'll be meeting at least once a day, every day through to next Friday, every weekday. Number 2, I want to make sure you understand that your sites on the server, I can leave them up for a while, but they will eventually go away. So you should be planning for the fact that all your photos or any materials that you have, that you keep copies of those, so that when the website goes away, you have all your material. So just keep that in mind, because that same space will be used again in the fall for another class. And I can leave it up for part of the summer if you want, but at some point I have to take it down.
Is there a way for us to download that and hang on to it?
Yes. So that's okay. So the question is not a complete question. So that's a really good question. So let me give you the full question. The full question that you're asking, I think, is not whether you can kind of download it, but whether you can actually republish it on another site. Because just downloading it doesn't really mean much. It just means you have a bunch of weird computer files.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes, you can, with caveats, because it's a little tricky and it depends on a few things. So that's actually a really good topic to spend a few minutes on, because you're not the only one that's going to have that question.
Good, yes.
Most of you will have that question, like, okay, how do I move? So the question is, how do you move a WordPress site from one place to another? And so let me give you some background on that. So there's a web server that holds all your files. Now that web server is on a service called hostmonster.com. They're one of the larger services. There are a couple of really large web hosting services. GoDaddy is they're like the Walmart of web publishing. They're huge. HostMonster is another really big company. It's one of a group of companies. Actually, Bluehost is the same as HostMonster, and so Bluehost is a really large company. And so we're on one of the large companies, and they, let's see, if you were to have another HostMonster account, their tech support would probably make it easier to move to another account in the same company. If you want to move it to a different company, which is fine, There's a little more involved because you would need to download it and make an archive copy of it, and then you'd need to be able to install it on your new host. So there are two issues. One is downloading all the files, and the other is reinstalling them somewhere else. So the downloading is a little on the trickier side because they're not, a WordPress site is not a standard static website. If you had a website that was what we call a static website, it would be relatively easy to simply use an FTP program and download the whole thing, and then simply use an FTP program and upload all those files to another server. That's, you know, it's not trivial, but it's not particularly technically hard. The issue with a content management system such as WordPress is that it's made up of, behind the scenes, you've got databases. You've got these SQL, structured query language databases on the server. Those you cannot easily just download like a file and then upload somewhere else. They're in a certain format, so you have to use a certain system to actually archive that database, download it, and then upload it to another server that has the database and reinstall it. And so there are ways to do that. Now, see if I can, it's easier to grab a copy of it from where it is now than it is to reinstall it somewhere else. So it's the reinstalling it that is going to be harder. So that depends on the kind of provider, the kind of hosting service that you have where you want to put the site. Now, you may or may not already have an account somewhere, so that has bearing. If you have an account with really good tech support, they can guide you through the process and almost do it for you. If you have an account with not so good tech support and you're on your own, that's much, much harder. So that's the main piece of it. So you may wish to inquire of your current hosting service. You may wish to send them a question that goes something like this. I want to move a WordPress site onto a pre-existing WordPress site from one site onto your site, onto my site. How should I do this? How can you help me with this? What do you need to let me do this? Okay, so in other words, you're asking them how much they can help and what technical needs they have to do that. They may have a tool that makes it really easy. They may guide you through the process. It depends on your service and how they have the WordPress sites on their service. The good news is WordPress is extremely common. Pretty much all of your commercial hosting services are familiar with WordPress. It's very, very, it's ubiquitous. So it's something that they should be able to help you with. And it's not going to be the first time they've ever asked that question. So they're going to know what to say. They're not going to say, WordPress, what's that? We have no idea how to help you. No, they're going to be like, okay, this is how it works. So you might want to make that query ahead of time. I'll do what I can to help you on that. I can tell you that before the end of the semester, which is 2 weeks from now, I can't even think about that because we're a little overwhelmed. Once a semester's over, again, the sites will stay there. And then I can help you individually with that. You know, it won't be a class situation anymore. That's not a problem. So before class ends, I can't go into detail on that in terms of trying to move anything or helping you with that. But after the class ends, we'll have a lot of time to do that. So rest assured that I will do what I can to make it work for you. So that's the first thing. And again, query your existing provider. Now, if you don't have space and you're thinking of getting space, to put your WordPress site or any WordPress site, then you want to look at what that provider gives you and how much they charge for it. And I can tell you when you're looking for hosting service, my #1 criterion is always support. I mean, all these companies, they have the hardware, they have the necessary hardware and the software, and they have the bandwidth, generally speaking, and it's really commodity up until you look at support. And support really does vary. And let me give you an example of something that just happened to me the other day, which is new and scary to me. Because I have always made sure that any place where I had web hosting, and I've had, over the years, different accounts, different places, that they always had 24/7 tech support, 24/7 live on the phone tech support, not 24/7 email, not 24/7 online chat, 24/7 on the telephone, live support with people that are knowledgeable and I can understand what they're saying and so forth. That to me has always been my number one criterion. Now, just the other day, I had an issue with my HostMonster account, a different account other than the account that we're on, but other accounts that I have, and found to my dismay that due to the pandemic crisis, their support has shifted from 24/7 online to, well, we're online from 9 to 5 or so. I can't remember the exact hours, but it's not 24/7 anymore. And of course, it was in the evening that I had a question and found this out. So it's like, oh, uh-oh. Now, I don't know how common that is in other providers that used to have 24/7 support. I don't know if it's a permanent or temporary situation. Haven't been able to investigate that further. But that's a little alarming to me because that's really important to me that I can, if I'm having a problem, I can call somebody and get it fixed and not wait till another day or send an email. I love it. I was on a service once where they said, we have 24/7 email tech support. And I was like, well, that's great that I can email you anytime I want, but that's not really that helpful to me. That could be an issue coming into the future with this whole new situation that we're all in. So if you are trying to compare services, there's some new questions you may wish to ask them, and that is like, how has the crisis impacted their support? Is this a temporary or permanent situation? When do they envision having 24/7 support if they don't currently? So you've got some new questions you can ask and I can ask. And I'm not trying to sell you on HostMonster, it's just the service that I'm currently using. But if you were to want to move your WordPress site to another site and you happen to be on a HostMonster account, I'm guessing that their tech support would make that relatively smooth for you since you wouldn't be moving to another company. It's just the way these things tend to work. So you could put that one down on your little notepad. Yeah, Robin.
On the same line, I have a large site already built. Excuse me, I haven't talked yet this morning. A large site already built that's supports my business, and I have on that site classes that I'm doing, and I already have artwork on that site that I had put in Dropbox. So I have a lot of pictures already in Dropbox. I don't know how they are sized and everything. So the next step for me is to getting them all sized. But so I have stuff on Dropbox, and then I have this other site, and I want to see how I can plug what we're doing here into that site. And it's also a WordPress site. But what I wanted to know is, can I take the library that I have on my other site and somehow plug it into this library? Is there a way to transfer stuff from library to library?
Well, I'll be honest with you offhand, I don't have the answer to that question at the top of my head. Okay. I could research it. I'm guessing, okay, you're going to love this answer. I'm guessing there might be a plugin for that. I don't know. That there could be a plugin for. Now, if you were... Yeah, because there's no like out of the box, oh, this is what you do in WordPress. You click here to move one library to another WordPress installation. There's nothing like that in WordPress itself. But the hosting service might be able to do that for you if both sites are on the same server.
I've played with a lot of galleries through this experience because it's my favorite plugin to try experimenting with. And one of them that I tried, one of the options was export from another library. So, one of the options.
Export or import?
Import, I think.
Okay, yeah.
It said, where do you want to get the pictures? Do you want to get it from media, being in there?
Was it another library specifically of another WordPress installation?
It sounded like, well, I didn't know. I didn't do it because it was not a question that came up for me, but it was like, here's all these options and where do you want to get your pictures from?
It sounds like it is, but just to be clear, I mean, there are plugin capabilities, and you probably know from experimenting with them, of these gallery plugins where you can in effect have more than one kind of library in WordPress with a plugin. So if they're not talking about that kind of situation, but they're really talking about a different WordPress installation, that's a good thing that they can do that. And I assumed there might be a plugin to do that. The question is, how well does a plugin work? Does it screw things up or not? Sounds like it might work. Sounds like it could be relatively trivial with the right plugin. I'm guessing that both WordPress installations would need to be on the same server. I'm not sure what the plugin wants. So that's another question. Of course, quite frankly, if you had more than one WordPress installation, you'd want them on the same server generally, because who needs to buy extra accounts, right? I mean, this Host Monster account that we're on literally has all your accounts on one domain name, which is designcruise.com, and one server account. So, you know, your basic hosting account, which is really cheap, which might be like $5 a month, might only limit you to one WordPress site per domain name or per hosting account. But certainly, once you get into the $10 a month range of mid-level accounts, usually you get a large number, if not unlimited number, of WordPress installations on that account, as well as a large number or unlimited number of domain names that can be hosted, meaning you could have different WordPress sites under different domain names, or a bunch of WordPress sites under one domain name, such as what we're doing here. There's generally not much difference there, except your URL, you'd probably want to have just your domain name, right? So that all these things generally depend on the hosting account. And once you
how do you find out your hosting account? I mean, because like somebody else built this. I have no idea who the hosting is. I don't know anything about that. She built it, and now I'm dealing with it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here, there's two sides to this, right? The client side and the designer side. So if you are a designer, you can, like, for example, I have my friend Ted, who has taken classes from me years ago and really got into WordPress in a big way after taking some classes. He got one of these accounts, which allows him to host many, many WordPress sites. And then he also bought some theme package. I don't remember the name of it. There's a lot of these around, where I can't remember how much it costs, at least a few $100, but then he got like a bunch of different themes and unlimited capacity to be able to resell to his clients. And so he basically, and this might be what you're in, Robin, he tells his clients, I'll do everything. I'll build the site. I'll host it. You just pay me, and that's it. You don't have to worry about hosting. You know, if you're about WordPress, you know, and I'll, you know, and so he does that with a bunch of people. And so he set himself up to do that, and that works really well for him and probably his clients as well. With other clients, they'd rather have more control. It depends on how much you know, right? So if you've taken hand coding classes, like some of you have, you're probably more comfortable with controlling it yourself. And you're probably more comfortable with, I'm going to do my own WordPress, I'm going to control it, and blah, blah, blah. And if you don't really, you know, and then other people, they have a WordPress site, not because they're into WordPress, but because they have a business that they want to run, or they want to display their work in WordPress, whatever. And they're less interested in spending the time on WordPress and they want to pay somebody else to deal with that. And they want to spend more time on what they love to do. And WordPress is not necessarily what they want to spend their time in. And though, you know, for those people, that kind of relationship with the developer works really well, the designer, because they don't have to deal with all the details and the minutia of WordPress. So if you're in that kind of situation, then to find out, you really have to talk to the person, your designer or your host. I guess it sounds like your designer is doing what my friend does, where they have different clients on their server that they're kind of reselling the space on. So in that case, you just really have to talk to that person. Okay. Find out. Now, let me caution you on something, because this is a situation that's happened to several of my friends who have died. They lost their domain names because they didn't own their domain names. They had business. They registered a domain name through their web design person. And so the web design person, oh, really? Sorry, I have to, excuse me for just a second. Their web design person registered the name for them, but didn't make them the owner. The web design person made them the owner and technical and administrative contact. which is all well and good until that person dies, and then the person whose business it is, they lose their domain name because they literally cannot renew it, and they lose it. And that's happened to 2 different friends of mine. And so I know that sounds kind of weird and almost morbid, but you want to make sure that you own your domain name and it's not owned by the person who's doing the service for you. And you can easily see that by doing what's called a whois. You can go to different websites. If you just type whois, you'll find places. Whois is one word. Or if you are on a Mac and you have the terminal application, which is inside your utilities folder, inside your applications folder, you can literally open up a terminal window and just type whois space domain name, like whoisjoe.com. Hit return, and it'll give you the record. Now, sometimes the record is private, which means somebody's paying a little extra so that their personal information is not displayed, and then you have to do a little more detective work. But if it's not private, you get all the information right there. You see who owns it. And so that's the first thing you can do just about your domain name. Make sure you own it. If you're paying a renewal once a year directly, then you probably own it. But if you're paying somebody else, you're not sure if you own it or not. So, so you want to make sure that you have the complete ownership of your domain name, which means that you are what's called the administrative as well as technical contact. And that's another piece of this is your domain name. Domain name hosting and domain name registration are not the same thing. And this is a common misperception. I always try to explain the difference. These are 2 separate functions which can be done by different companies or the same company. I have all my domain names registered at gkg.net, and I have all my domain names hosted at hostmonster.com. They're completely different companies. Companies usually do both, like GoDaddy, HostMonster, Bluehost, all these companies, they're both registrars as well as hosting companies. Registration simply means that you're reserving the name for your own use. It doesn't mean you're doing anything with it. It means you own it. It's kind of like a vacant lot. You buy the real estate, you own the lot. Whether or not you build on it, which is your website, that's a different story. So you can either rent or own. So if you are owning, if you have your own domain name, then you own it. And then you get registration. So you're registering it once a year. You're paying like 10 or 11 bucks a year for the mere purpose of just reserving the name for your own use. The hosting is more complex. The hosting is how does your website and email work for your domain name? And the hosting company doesn't need to be the registrar. It's convenient if it's the same company. Then certainly the companies like to make you think it's all one package and it can't be separated because they want all your business, not some of it. But really, they're 2 separate functions. So you can have domains registered with the registrar and hosted in another company. There's no problem with that at all. Or it can be the same company. So the important thing is where it's hosted, the registration is almost commodity. But the only thing about registration that's not commodity is whether or not you're paying extra to keep your information private. But other than that, it's commodity and it's all the same service. Now, the hosting is where all the complexity lies. So the hosting is websites and email, right? Hosting means websites and email. So if you have a hosting account and you start to build a site on it, and then you want to move that site somewhere else, that's always more complicated than staying on the same site. So the main thing is if you're gonna start being standardized on some site, you're going to start your work at some site, you really don't want to do that with the intention of moving it later. It's better to take the extra time and look at the services provided, look at the costs, look at what your needs are, and pick an appropriate hosting service and kind of get that ironed out before like haphazardly picking a hosting service, then building a site, and then realizing that you really want to move that site because there's something about the hosting service that doesn't work for you. And that's always more complex. You break things, it takes time, it's a hassle, lots of phone support. So if you're on a hosting service that you like, stay there. If you're not, then you really have some decisions to make about whether or not you want to stay there or move to another site because there's costs involved either way. Again, my number one criterion, as I mentioned before, is how good is their support. And if you want to see that, call their support at different times of day and night, and different days of the week, and see how long you're on hold, and see if you get a live person, and so forth. Let me stop there, because I think I'm probably going above and beyond your answer to your question the answer to your question. But the real key is who's hosting the site. And if you're going through a designer and you're the client, you should ask some questions, like you want to make sure that you own your domain name, that you don't need them to do any technical changes. The other thing on the domain name is that you can be the owner of the site, but your support person can be the contact, the technical contact, and sometimes they have to sign off on any change you make through email with the email address that's registered. And if it's their email address and not yours, then you're kind of dependent on them being there if you want to make a change. So that's something to be aware of. So
I'm in a position where I had this gal do my website, and then she had a tech person, and I was using the tech person, and then the tech person just stopped corresponding with me, like would not get back to me for weeks. And I fired her, and I said, screw you, I've got somebody else. So I found somebody else. She's doing a great job, and I want her to do that, but I'm also trying to get myself up to speed, which is why I'm in this class, to figure out, you know, what's going on. So I'll have to check on all that, but thank you. I appreciate all that information, because I will switch it.
And you know, as you see, I mean, there's complexity here, but WordPress does make it possible for somebody who knows no coding to really manage a full-blown website. Mm-hmm. And so you may find now that you're a little more confident in what's going on with WordPress, and you may find that you need to rely less on outside consultants. So and maybe eventually you won't want to use them at all. I don't really know, because I don't know what your personal situation is. Yeah. But certainly, you know, at this point in time, you probably see that you could establish a site and set it up and develop it and manage it pretty much on your own. I mean, that's kind of how WordPress works. So once you get through the basics of, oh, okay, this is how I do it. Okay, yeah, this is how I do a gallery. This is how I do this. Now, you know, you go like, oh, I don't need to pay somebody else so much. You know, now you might get stuck once in a while and need help, but in general, WordPress allows you to do this on your own. Yeah. But that's the benefit of a content management system such as WordPress. The technical details of the hosting and all that stuff, that's where a lot of times people are a little murky, and they need some outside help. So that's why I'm trying to tell you how the process generally works. Yeah. Okay. These are great questions.
All right.
So let me ask a question of you folks. How's your confidence level in general? Are you feeling a little more like this is making sense? Are you feeling a lot more like, yeah, I think I can do this without too much hand holding? Are you stuck somewhere? Is there a showstopper somewhere? Are you in need of a specific thing that maybe I can provide? Do you need some general guidance on something? So what, and again, as we move towards the final stages of the class, as you're thinking of what happens to your site afterwards, do you have a plan? Do you have a post plan so that you can move your site, or maybe you decide you're just going to do a new site and you'd rather not move it and you'd rather start fresh? That's also very common. That's actually really common, that you go, okay, now I see how it really works. Now I see the mistakes I made. Now I see how I wouldn't have done it if I had started fresh. So now I am going to start a fresh site on my own site. And now I can start with a fresh copy of WordPress and pretty much know what to do, which is kind of the point of the course. So if that's where you are and you don't care so much about this old site, that's a different, you have a different set of concerns. So what can I help you with right now? What showstoppers, where are you at in terms of what do you need to be able to develop your site further and get this thing where you want it to be? How can I help you? Yeah, Rebecca.
So I took the WordPress class because I designed and managed the Seacliff Improvement Association WordPress account that uses the theme Graphene, and it got corrupted at some point a couple years ago and looked really bad on mobile sites. It's kind of okay on a computer, but it's just not. So I took the class to see if I could repair that, and I realized after even using, installing Yellow Pencil and messing around with it, that I think I have to uninstall it and start over because it's just too messed up. Yellow Pencil just isn't doing it. I've already finished my project for this class, so it's ready for you to look at whenever you want. I kind of knew a bit of WordPress before I took the class, and so I don't have any more needs except that I think what I learned is that I just have to maybe I've chosen a different theme for the Seacliff's website, and I may, after my board meeting tonight, just, move over to that and uninstall the Graphene one and maybe reinstall Graphene. It has some really nice, that's the theme I used for my project in this class, and that's how I could tell the other site was messed up. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's ugly. We also got our site hacked in January, and it was funny because the files weren't that corrupted, but I now have to pay more than the website hosting cost at Bluehost to protect the site from hacking. So we hate using our membership dues for stuff like that because we don't really need a website. We have over 350 household members. We don't need more members, but people have an expectation of a website, and it's a nice place for us to archive everything, all of our newsletters and things like that. So it has to be safe and secure.
So when you said your site had been corrupted, the first question I was going to ask before you said more, I was going to say, sounds like a plugin problem, until you said we got hacked, which still could be a plugin problem. In fact, it probably was. I'm guessing
because
you got hacked in through an unsecured plugin that was maybe not updated or maybe just a bad plugin.
Yeah. And
so I was going to suggest disabling all your plugins to see how the site, if there was no problem with the site,
okay.
Because you could, before you just throw out the baby with the bathwater,
yeah,
that's a weird expression, but before you just decide to abandon everything, do a few simple tests like disable every plugin, go in and disable all plugins, and then see, oh, the problem's not with the theme, it's with the plugin not working properly with the theme. So that would be my first test. So you may, I don't know, it sounds maybe when somebody got in there, they did muck things up in a way that you just want to do something fresh. That's possible or probable. But before you make the radical decision to just abandon everything, do a few simple tests, like disable all plugins, and then look at it on your phone or your mobile device, and then, because it's probably supposed to be a responsive theme. It should look fine on the phone.
Yeah, and it's just not happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit there and I tweak it, and it's just.
Yeah. So if you disable all plugins and then see how things operate, you may start to realize that the problem is a specific plugin. Or you may realize right off the bat, it's not that simple. There's corruption in the theme itself, and you do need to start over. Or just try changing the theme.
Yeah.
The problem is once somebody hacks in, it's hard to know what exactly is there. I don't know how they, I don't really know the details, and maybe nobody does. But once somebody does hack into something, the safest thing to do is to, abandon that and do a fresh installation. That's the safest thing. But again, it could be just that they got in and they mucked around in a certain plugin, and maybe the damage was constrained. So until you do that test, you don't know. So that's the first thing I would do, and then you could proceed from there. Now, if you have, you can go into WordPress itself, as you know, into your control panel, and you can just disable your plugins right there. If you are the owner of your hosting account, you said it was Bluehost?
Yeah, it's Bluehost. They were really helpful during the hacking, by the way.
Yeah, they're actually a pretty solid company. HostMonster's the same company. It's the same thing, different division. If you have your own control panel, not WordPress dashboard, but your hosting account control panel, you can go in there under the WordPress area of the hosting control panel, and usually they have like what's called a cPanel interface or some kind of control panel.
Yeah, they do.
Usually you can go in there, and there's a place where you can simply say disable all plugins.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, without even being your WordPress administrator. You're the hosting owner.
Right. Okay.
You have control over the WordPress installations.
Cool.
Just as I can do the same thing with all your accounts. I can go in there and click on a button that says, I want to disable every one of Robin's plugins. Boom. Because sometimes that's necessary if somebody does hack in or you have a bad plugin. So that might even be another test you can do outside of WordPress. Go into your hosting control panel. There'll be a WordPress area, and Bluehost can help you find it, but you might be able to find it on your own. And you'll see a way where it says, it says, disable all the plugins on this domain name, everything on this WordPress installation or other domain, and do that, and then do some tests. So that might even disable stuff that doesn't show up in your WordPress control panel and your WordPress dashboard in the same way. I mean, you should be able to accomplish the same thing from your WordPress dashboard, but you can really make sure you've gotten everything by doing the control panel for the host and just saying no plugins at all on this site, including stuff that came with the theme. So that's another test you can do.
Thank you. That is really useful.
Yeah, and then proceed from there. These are great questions. So, as you can see, there's a lot that we could cover, and I could take you down certain roads. I'm finding it seems to be serving you better to simply continue to answer your specific questions. If you want, I can go down another road. We could focus on a topic, but at this point in time, I'm thinking just total question and answers as much as we can is very helpful to you. So let me know if there's something that you want me to expand on or a road to go down, or keep asking questions. So I'm going to keep answering your questions.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, more questions.
I have a question, but I don't know if it's beyond the scope of the class, so I don't know if you would need to answer it maybe at the end of one of our sessions if you have time this week or something like that. I have an issue with one of my galleries, and well, actually all of my galleries had no space underneath them, so they just bumped right up to the text underneath it. And I had to do a little CSS hack. We'll add some CSS to give us some space. But on one of my galleries, it's not working at all. It works, and then it doesn't stick. Like by the next day, the space is gone again. And I tried a few different things, and I don't know what's going on. So I might need some technical help with that.
That's odd that you say it works and then stops working. That's the odd thing. That's very interesting. I mean, I gotta think about that for a second. What would be causing that?
It's actually the first, and it's the first use of this gallery that I had. I'm using it on a number of pages, but it's actually the first one I did, and I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I've even compared the galleries side by side in separate windows to look to see if I did something different, and I can't find anything.
So, from a technical point of view, what catches what I find intriguing is the fact that you do something and it works, and then later on it doesn't work and you haven't made any changes. From a technical point of view, that catches my attention, like what would cause that, which is probably not specifically a WordPress question. It could be, but doesn't sound like it. Then that would see troubleshooting in this business, and I've said this many times in many of my classes, it's mostly about troubleshooting, right? And this is very true in web design in general. Whereas you spend 20% of your time building something, and then you spend 80% of your time trying to figure out why this one thing isn't working. It's really troubleshooting, and how to approach troubleshooting is a skill. It's both a mindset and a skill. So in troubleshooting, so first off, you have to have the mindset that you go into troubleshooting without a preconceived notion. Preconceived notions, okay, let me put it this way. If you've got years of experience in this, preconceived notions are very helpful. But if you don't have years of experience, preconceived notions can hurt you. So it's a mindset shift. Number one, don't go in thinking, it's probably this, it's probably that. Yeah, it looks like it's this, and I'm going to focus my troubleshooting on this. Go in thinking, I have no idea what it is. And start to whittle it down by doing some simple tests, like, the turning off the plugins and so forth. There's different techniques of troubleshooting, right? Now, when something is intermittent, where it happens and then it doesn't happen, or you fix it and you have to fix it again or something, that's kind of, they're the most frustrating, and they're the ones that are most intriguing. And I can tell you right off the bat, my mindset in having dealt with lots of troubleshooting is, you fix it, it goes away, it comes back, or it happens in certain situations. It sounds like it could be related to the browsers. And I say that because if you make a change and then you're seeing behavior in a browser, and then later on you're seeing different behavior and you haven't made any other changes, then my mindset goes, browser, what is it? What's going on here? Now, as you may know, browsers cache into their memory situations that they like to hold on to. This is especially true with style sheets. So when you're building a website, for example, and then you test it, and then you make changes and you test it, you make changes and you test it, frequently what happens is this browser caching gets in the way. Browser caching is an efficiency technique so that browsers don't have to keep downloading stuff every time you load a page. Because if you go to a website, and let's say it's got the same banner image on every page, and you go to another page, and you go to another page, another page, the browser's not going to keep re-downloading that image every time. It's going to download it the first time. It's going to hold it in the memory. It's going to go, when you go to the next page, the browser looks at it and goes, oh, I've already downloaded the same image, same file name, same image. I'm not going to download it again. I'm just going to redisplay what I've already got in my memory, right? So browsers cache also style sheets more than HTML. So you can edit HTML, and then usually the browser shows you the change. You edit the style sheet, sometimes the browser doesn't show you the change because it's still holding the old style sheet in memory. So you really have to try to force the browser to reload the page. Sometimes you quit the browser and reload it. Sometimes you have to go to the brauser and say, delete all history and cache, or delete all.
I've done that a number of times already, and so I think I need to just redo the gallery on this page or something because it's working.
Okay, so you've already
other pages. It's working fine.
And Debbie, you've heard my spiel on this a little bit from other classes and browser caching. Browser caching continues to plague me. I generally I have Safari, Chrome, and Firefox. On my desktop. I have a lot of browsers on a tablet and a phone and laptop. And so I'm constantly looking at things in different browsers. And if I have any kind of problem, I generally whip up the other browsers and look at it in 3 browsers just to make sure it's not a browser issue. And so you might want to just double check that every time you are working on this, you look at it in 3 different browsers, just to make sure it's consistent. Because if you're seeing the same thing in all 3 browsers, that gives you information that's different than if you're seeing something different in 3 browsers. It sounds to me like you've already kind of been through that phase of troubleshooting and you're back to, yeah, there's something about the plugin. And that sounds like you're on the money on that. Sounds like you've already figured that out. Good job. So that's something we'd have to dig under the hood and take a look at that. And at some point you do the cost-benefit analysis of your time. This is something that happens a lot with me. I'm working on something. I've invested a certain amount of time into building something, and there's some kind of seemingly intractable problem. Now, generally, I can calculate in my mind, okay, how many minutes, how many hours would it take for me to start over? Let's say I start from scratch on this particular problem, whatever the problem is. Could be a certain web page, could be a whole website, it could be some dealing with a plugin management issue, dealing with a theme issue, whatever it is. Okay, I go, okay, it's easy to calculate how much, easier to calculate how much time would it be to start over. I'll start with a different theme. I'll start with a different plugin, and then customize whatever, and I can calculate that in my mind. That'll probably be X number of hours. Then I look at the troubleshooting side of it. And I go, I really don't know. It's a lot harder to calculate that time. Maybe I could fix this in an hour, maybe it'd be 10 minutes, maybe I could spend all day on it and I wouldn't get there yet. And I look at that. I mean, very, very, I consciously go, should I cut my losses or can I salvage it? And I can tell you more often than not, I make the calculation that I'm gonna abandon that plugin. I'm gonna abandon that whatever it is and do something different, because at least then I have an idea of time that's finite. Whereas sometimes the troubleshooting can go on for days and days and you're like, oh man, and you still think you're close and you don't get there. And so at some point you cut bait, and I'm not suggesting that you do just abandon it, but I'm just saying that at some point you make that calculation. So that's another way of looking at troubleshooting. It's easier to do the calculation in your mind of how many hours it takes to do something fresh. It's harder to figure out how many hours of troubleshooting it's going to take to fix a problem. And so sometimes, and I used to kind of have this attitude that, damn it, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to figure this out and fix it. And that attitude has helped me a lot in the past, because along the way, you learn things. And then on the other hand, at a certain point in time, at a certain point in the process, you go, you know what, my time is not better spent doing it this way. So that's more of how you view how you want to spend your time. Troubleshooting to me is learning. On the other hand, sometimes I just want to get the job done. And the most efficient way to do that sometimes is just dump that, start here, right? And I do those kind of harsh calculations all the time. So it's something to think about. But there are those factors. But that said, I would love to take a look at it. I don't know if we need to do it right now, because we to get into that, but I think we can do that offline a different time.
Yeah, like that's why I was saying maybe at the very end of class, like for 5 minutes or 10 minutes after class when you don't have something immediately.
Yeah, we can do that for 5 minutes after this class, but I do have an 11:15 DM1 class. Goes till 2:30. So can't spend a whole lot of time after this particular session, but we can. So hold that one. That one's more of a technical one that maybe a lot of people would go over a lot of heads we don't need to kind of get into the weeds too much on that one in this context.
Okay.
But happy to do that later.
Okay.
But good question. What other questions you guys have?
Well, just generally also, you said that the sites are going to stay up for a couple of weeks or something like that. What about the YouTube videos? Will they stay up as well?
That's a good question.
Some things you've shown. And
what's really interesting to me, and I don't know how many of you deal with YouTube or YouTube channels, but I have two different YouTube channels. I had a personal one that I'm not really doing anything with, and that's the one that I had originally put I think the first one or two of the DM56 videos went on that site. And then I had another channel, which is what everything is on now, and I moved everything over. And the YouTube channel I have now is what's called my Teacher John channel. But that one is attached to my Cabrillo email.
Oh.
And what I'm finding is that because Google, I have a love-hate relationship with Google, mostly hate, but because Google likes to when you get a Gmail account or a YouTube account, or a Google Docs account, Google Hangouts account, whatever, Google likes to consolidate it all under one account. It doesn't want to keep them separate because Google wants to track you in everything you do, right? So if you are logged into your Gmail account or your YouTube or whatever, and then you go and you do a Google search or everything, now it knows, oh, it's you that's doing the search. It's you that's doing this. It's you that's doing that. And it ties it all together. It's you that's looking at that ad. It's you that's buying that product. And I kind of rebel against all the tracking. So I try not to use Chrome as much as possible. I try not to use Gmail, but working at Cabrillo, which is standardized on the Gmail suite and the Google suite, it's virtually impossible to escape the clutches of Google. So because my YouTube channel that these videos are on is attached to my John at JOGOBSKY at cabrillo.edu email, it's all, Google wants this all under my Cabrillo umbrella. And I can't even change the email address associated with it because that's a Cabrillo email address, which is done through Gmail. Because I don't know if you know this, but the cabrillo.edu addresses are actually all really done through Gmail. Google manages all of Cabrillo's email infrastructure. So I'm having problems with that because I don't, well, I did it that way this semester, but I think in the future semesters I'll probably do it differently and use my other YouTube channel or set up a new one just for my classes separate from the whole Google suite. I know that sounds weird because some people find it very convenient to have everything under one Google account. I just don't like it. So that's a long answer to a short question. So the answer is that eventually I was going to just remove them. But would it be helpful for you to leave them up, for me to leave them up for a while, I guess is my question to you all.
Yeah, good to look to reference some of them.
Okay. I'll leave them up for a while, maybe through the summer, but I think in the fall I will establish a different way to publish the videos. Just because I want to kind of not have them all under this one giant Google account, which is driving me a little bit crazy. So that might be more detailed than you need to know. So the bottom line is I'll leave them up for the summer. How's that? But then I'll probably take them down.
Okay.
Do you find the, now you are the core group that comes to the classes. There are a few students that don't, but they watch the videos. So maybe the question is more for them, but for you guys, even though you've been here in the video recording, you're still finding it useful to use the videos. Is that correct? I see some nods. Okay.
So, yeah.
I don't have time to go back and look at them, frankly. So I'd rather show up for the class and absorb as much as I can.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm
do
at.
both a little bit.
Yeah. This
I
is
have to go back to the video.
Yeah, this is a real new paradigm. You know, this is really uncharted territory for everybody, teachers and students and schools. I can't tell you how many meetings I'm in where we're trying to figure it all out. We're trying to figure out how are we going to do this in the fall? Can we do this without the computer labs open? How long can we do this? You know, it's pretty demanding on a lot of teachers and students because we're not all set up to learn and teach this way. Although this looks like the new reality for the foreseeable future. I mean, I'm just changing my mindset to think about this over a 2-year period of time. I don't think this is, oh yeah, we flattened the curve, everything's back to normal in the fall, everything's going to be great. You know, everything I'm reading, my crystal ball is a little cloudy, but I certainly don't think we're going to be anywhere back to normal in terms of how Cabrillo works or anything over the next year or two. I think it's going to take 1 to 2 years before we're actually having real classes again and everything's fully in person. I think this is the reality for the foreseeable future. So we're all adjusting to this. We're all trying to come up with better ways to do it. There's this whole debate. Is it better to have synchronous or asynchronous online classes? And to some degree, it's an artificial distinction. Because yes, we can do an asynchronous online class where I just record videos with nobody there and just post them and anybody can watch them at any time. That's asynchronous. Or we can do it this way where some people can participate in it, but still the videos are posted and everybody can look at them at any time they want later. So to me, it's an artificial distinction between synchronous and asynchronous. So I figure it might as well be synchronous for some people who can benefit more from the direct give and take. And the videos are always available for everybody anytime. So, but these are the kind of pedagogical debates that are going on at school where we're trying to figure out how to improve on this model. how to help more
Rick
students.
Rick Sims' classes have always been where you could attend in person or virtually attend, either way you chose. And then you had to be there for the tests. But, and you could, and then he posted the video of those combo classes online.
Yeah,
So
and
doing that
there's,
for years.
but there's another piece of this is the middle ground. We've had online programs for years, right? But all of our online classes at Cabrillo and everywhere else were always structured with the knowledge that we had physical support centers open for students who needed some extra help. They could go to the computer labs with faster computers and more bandwidth and so and get their work done more efficiently, or maybe they didn't have computers at all at home, or internet connections or the proper software. This is especially a problem in digital media, where the expensive Adobe Suite is necessary for most digital media classes. This one's an exception because we don't need the Adobe Suite for this class. But it's certainly a lot to grapple with the physical support centers open. But when the campus is completely closed down and there's no library, tutorial centers, physical support, and all the support is virtual, many students don't do well in that kind of environment. We've lost a lot of those students in our classes at Cabrillo this semester. How we get them back and service them and help them in the future is one of our problems, because there's a tremendous equity issue. And not everybody has high-speed connections. Some people live up in the mountains, and it's, you know, the service is terrible there. Some people don't have good connections. Some people don't have the computer hardware necessary to make it easier, and so their lives are more difficult doing the same thing. So there are tremendous issues that we're trying to iron out as we go forward. This semester's been just a nightmare. So we're just flying from the seat of our pants this semester. Everybody knows that it's not an ideal semester and that many things have fallen by the wayside. So we're trying to figure out how can we improve on this model going forward. We're not even sure yet in the fall what the model will be. That decision will be made over the summer.
The CTC is saying that they're thinking now, if they do open, that they'll have the computers available spaced out, but those of us who are giving support will be supporting remotely like we do now. So yeah, you can't get somebody to physically come up and touch your computer and show you how to do it or problem solve next to you. We will be, hopefully from my point of view, if I come back, it's got to be behind a wall so that nobody can put their face in my face to ask me for help. But it'll be like I'm helping right now from a remote computer, from that computer that somebody's using, which is the way I
so you can see the complexity of how this plays out. There are these different sub-scenarios of how much physical support is there. Is there any at all? Is the campus completely closed in the fall? Is it partially open? Who's there? Who can come there? How does that work? Nobody has answers to these questions yet. And yet we need to plan like a year or two in advance. So it's a bit of a nightmare to try to figure this out for both teachers and students and for the institution and for the whole community, right? You know, large gatherings are going to be the last things that kind of return to normal. And so will there be a middle ground in the fall where we do have some of the support centers open on a limited basis, or not, even in the fall, or maybe later in the fall will they open? I mean, we don't know. And so it's really hard to plan in this environment. And so you'll notice that the Cabrillo summer schedule, of course, is completely online, but the Cabrillo fall schedule, which is published, says we're meeting in classroom this and that, in classroom that, and that's probably not going to happen. But again, the official decision hasn't been made yet. So July 1st, there's going to be a meeting about that, where they may or may not make the decision. And then on August 1st, they're going to finally make the decision. They haven't made it on July 1st. My guess is by July 1st, they'll say, we're not sure yet. My guess is by August 1st, they'll say we're all online in the fall. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. That's my guess based on, you know, reading the New York Times and so forth. But nobody knows. So
John, I had a question.
Yeah, Rebecca.
When I signed up for this class, it said it was all online, so I wasn't even expecting what we're doing now.
Right.
I didn't know how that was originally going to
However,
happen.
all online back then meant all online, but students could come into all the places on campus for help. They could get hands-on tutorial help. They could go to the CTC and use the computers and the printers and the scanners and the graphic software. They could do all that on campus. I could meet with you and go over your stuff, you know, and so even though we always had an online program, our online program was never envisioned to have all these physical supports absent. You could go and talk with a counselor face to face. You could get somebody in the CTC to help you. You could use those facilities. And so when you strip all that away, it's really a different, now you're completely online with none of that. And so what has happened is, for some students, that's not a big adjustment. Like most of you in this quote room, for most of you here, maybe that hasn't been too bad. But for the students that aren't right here right now in the class, some of them have dropped, some of them are still in the class, but they're the kind of students that they just don't have the same physical stuff at home. They may not have the same situation at home. They may have other things they're dealing with now that have been compounded by this, and we lose those folks. That's the real tragedy of this.
I'm wondering, since I didn't know what to expect for this class as far as meeting, but I think for this group of people and you, the Zoom call is awesome because we can share our screens instead of, coming, no offense, coming to see you. And we can fix things right there in front of everyone else. If we're not having that problem, and like when I turn my screen off here, sometimes I'm just working on my site while I'm listening to you. So it's even better because I'm installing a plugin while we're in class, I'm checking it out. And so, not to make more work for you, but if you had a WordPress class that you offered that was like this, like Zoom Press class, and then for the students who don't have the support that we all have at home with our own computers, because I've never been in the lab, I have no idea, I would never go there, I would just do my stuff at home. Maybe you offer a smaller group setting so that people can sit in the same room and do the things that you mentioned before, because there's less of them. I know that's just much more work for you, but
well, it's actually the extra work for the teacher in this kind of environment, that's kind of a little bit of a given, and that's not that big of a deal. The real problem is that for some students, the online modality simply, for whatever reason, and there are a variety of reasons, is not good.
Yeah, I had my son completely unenrolled for the whole semester.
Exactly. So, yeah, the smaller classes in quotes. I mean, yeah, but and I'm not trying to discount what you're saying. We're looking at all this stuff,
right?
And this is all important. But we've noticed that for some students, it's the modality itself, and it's very difficult to get around the modality of doing everything through a computer screen. For some people, it works really well, and for some students, it's just not the way they operate. Right. And there are different reasons for that, and they're not. This is not a homogeneous group, so it's a difficult problem. And I have to end in a second. Let me just say, from an institutional point of view, Cabrillo's got a mission to serve the community. We take that mission very seriously, and a really big part of our mission is equity and giving the students who need extra help the help they need to get a leg up, and to kind of, that's what the community college system is supposed to be about, the community. And given this new reality, we're not serving the entire community in a way that we have in the past. And so we're trying to figure out how to do that. It's really hard. We don't have the answers. And the things you've mentioned, we've talked about, these are all things we can do to improve it, but The modality itself is problematic for, you know, a good number of students that we need to serve. And we don't have the answers yet. And it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating. Given the fact that this is all frustrating, that's the piece for me personally and for many people at Cabrillo and in the community college system at large. That's the problem that is almost intractable. How do we help the students that need the most help that we're here for when we can't really be here for them right now? So yeah, we can help the greater number of students with this kind of situation, Zoom and everything. But there's still a minority of students, a significant minority that we can't seem to reach now. And that's where we're kind of going, how do we do this? And I don't have an answer.
My other two classes are studio classes. So, you know, we don't have the facility. You can imagine, how do you do photography when you don't have the darkroom available? How do you do Fab Lab classes when you can't have the fabrication lab?
Yeah,
these are the kind of questions that we are grappling with right now. And
So
how do you do
classes
planning when you don't even know what's
affected.
going to happen? Yeah.
The teachers have been marvelous doing the transition, but you know, part of the painting experience is seeing how the person next to you paints, and that's gone. You know, part of the sculpture class is actually using that fabrication equipment. And yes, we're doing sculpture, but we're missing a component.
Yeah, so this is, you know, on one level, the digital media classes, we have the least amount of hassle to make this transition. But still, it's a problem for a lot of our students. But imagine students that teachers that teach dance. How about athletics programs? How about, you know, like you said, the studio program? I mean, like, this is a bit of a nightmare. So actually, I see that it's almost 11:10, so I really do need to go to start the 11:15. So I just looked at the clock and I forgot that it was this late. So I do have to go. I'm sorry, but we'll meet again tomorrow. I'm looking at my list at 11. I think tomorrow's class is scheduled for 11. I'll try to send an email reminder, but 11 tomorrow, same link. And I will see you all there. So
Thank you.
Bye.
have a great day and stay safe. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.